Do we have any more volunteers that want to come up and tell stories? Elizabeth, I see your hand. Beautiful woman. Your turn.
Just like a little kid when I first met Dan. Michelle wanted to come up with me, but I'll start. I'm going to make this really, really brief and really quick. Dan meant more to me than I can even possibly, that I realized, not unlike Martin. And I hope is Martin out there? Or is he keep this? All right, Martin, I want you to hear this, okay? You don't get to hide for this one. So, really, really quickly, many, many years ago, when I was about 14 years old, I'm going to start with Susan and then I'll get to the point. Susan sat down with me. We were having a family party and Susan was there. She knows my mother, and she sat down. She had a glass of wine and she said to me, Liz, if you ever go to college, I want to help you out. And I couldn't believe that anybody would do that, number one. But more importantly, many years went by and Susan got married, and it was this Dan person that I had to, I wasn't sure because, Susan was one of my many mothers. And when I met Dan, I didn't exactly know what to do with him, but through the years, he wasn't exactly right. But many years later, I went to college, and Susan and Dan and Kate and Martin were all together, and they had their family, and I thought, there's no way, that was, I don't think Susan will ever remember that. But lo and behold, that is exactly what happened, is that Susan and Dan both supported me, but more than just college. There was so much more and a deeper, unspoken level. And I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning last night thinking about Dan and what he meant to me. And he was my fairy godfather in many ways. There was one particular thing he did, and I will end it at this, or actually I have one last thing with her, that he wrote my first resume. And my brothers.
Got the job.
And yay! Okay, how many hands? How many resumes did he do? Okay. That changed my life. It changed my life. And now, guess what I do for people? I write resumes for them.
All right.
And there's never a time, well, it's not all I do, but it's never a time that I don't think about Dan when I'm doing that, or anything for that matter. So I want to thank Susan and your whole family. I'm was envious, always envious, and always was incredibly thankful that you kept me a part of your family. How lucky am I? And the last thing, and I'll pass this to Michelle, is that Michelle and I went about 2 days before Dan passed. And the thing about Dan, that smile. And I got to say, I love you and thank you, Dan. And I got to say some things to him that I know he heard me, and I know he understands. Thank you guys, okay?
Thank you, Dan. I love you, Dan.
I don't have a lot of words. I asked Liz if she come up with me, but I just have a couple things. Couple things.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Susan used to take me to her house and let me stay the night there, and we'd color and have a great time. And I remember one time I was there, and she said, we gotta go visit Man. I'm like, okay. So we drove over there, and she gets back in the car, and she looks at me, and she goes, I'm gonna marry that man. And I was so little and innocent. I was like, okay, sounds good, So I was always waiting for her to marry Dan, because she told me I was like 5 years old. So little, so for her to confide that in me, I'd always cherished that and always brought that. And always been a part of my family. Kids were part of my wedding, and yeah, Dan will definitely be missed. And I'm so glad that I have this extended family that I can call my family.
It is a good family we have. Thank you, Tom. When the babies are having babies, you know the family's been around.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Dan was a great man. He was like a second father to me, really. As you all know,
Eat that mic.
my mom was a single mom for the most part, and Dan came along right around, 1978 or so, something like that. I was living with Susan at the time. She was like a second mom. I really liked Susan, and then Dan came along and was kind of jealous, to be honest. But anyway, I was maybe 12 or 13 at the time. But anyway, that's. But I remember when they got the house in Kensington, and Dan hired me. I was doing stuff around their house. One time I made a big mistake, and I think I let a paintbrush dry, probably a $20 Boars brush paintbrush, and then he hired me. But that's water under the bridge. But some of my most fond memories of Dan is, going to lunch at San Diego Technical Books. I worked at San Diego Technical Books. He helped write resumes for me. I think he's instrumental in getting me into college. So, love you for that, Dan. But probably one of my most favorite stories is we'd go to the dump. He would take us to the dump. I helped him around the house. We would load up this little Datsun truck, I think at the time, and we would go to the dump. Or maybe he had a Jeep at the time, I forget. One of the most favorite things that we would ever do is that, if you've never been to the dump, this is one of the things Dan says, you have to go to the dump at least once in your life. It's quite an adventure. He made it a lot of fun because, there's always those trucks putting the water out on the road, on the dirt road, and it gets kind of slippery. And when Dan saw that, he would punch it in this little truck, and it was so much fun. So to this day, I always tell people, you gotta go to the dump at least once. Dan could make the dump fun. He could make a lot of things fun, and I went on a couple of backpacking trips with him. This one to Mount Whitney was quite an adventure. It was 70 miles. It was, my knee was hurting, I think, on the first day. I think Jim Thomas, thank God, had a little bottle of ibuprofen that kept me through. It was a lot of hard work. I was worried I wasn't going to make it, but being with Dan and all those guys on that trip was one of the most incredible adventures I've ever had. And I'm sad that Dan didn't quite make it to Mount Whitney, but he did make it. He was okay. And Jim, I'm interested in maybe going to this trip, so let me know. I will have to start working out a lot more, get in shape. I'm not any younger myself. But anyway, Dan was like a father to me, like I said, and I miss him very much. I love him, and thank you.
Okay, you have to do it like that. Anybody want to come up? Tell a story? One guy in the back coming up. He beat you, Joe. You're next. I saw him coming and then you stood up. I was like, oh. But I don't know who he is, so.
You don't know who I am?
Not yet. What's your name?
Bill.
Bill. Thank you.
Yes, I am.
Are you a friend of Bill's? Yeah, I've heard that.
I'll try to keep this brief. Okay, I'm Bill Dudley. Closer.
Better. Good.
Better.
Better. More better.
I met Dan through Vera, who is Dan's niece. So when I started going out with her, I don't know, maybe before we were married, when every time we drive by 15, wherever in the vicinity of Oceanside, I'd say, let's stop by Dan and Susan's house. Because you're always welcome, it's always interesting to do it. And so anyways, I was out with Vera together, and finally, after much nudging from her, I finally proposed. Okay, yeah, let's get married. She says, okay, how about 6 weeks from now? It's October, so we went to Dan. First thing we did was go to Dan and Susan's house, and she said, oh, okay, this is Bill. We were thinking to have, can you help us out? And he says, okay, Thanksgiving dinner will be the rehearsal dinner for our wedding. So in addition to the regular Alex, Mike, and Dominique and everybody else, so we had my folks and my brother and sister and their wives came out, and so we had packed the house full. It was actually sort of a tradition. We had the rehearsal dinner, and then like for 5 years afterwards, we had extra family coming over to visit. So all my mom and dad wanted to say, give their love to. I just talked to them today, and they remember Dan very fondly. And carving the turkey, yeah, he was the one he tried to teach me how to carve the turkey. I'm still not sure I know how, but I always liked his lessons. And then even after year, they moved from Oceanside to Normal Heights to Hillcrest. But every once in a while, Vera would say, "Oh, we're in the neighborhood. Let's go say hi," because we always wanted to drop in because it was always fun to talk to them. It was just a privilege. Oh, what's the other one? Oh, the other memory I have was his 50th birthday party.
Oh, that was wild.
It was mostly a bunch of people Dan's age doing belly shots and crazy things, and then people, usually younger people like me and my wife, kind of watching and going, "Oh, really? Okay." But that's memorable. So anyways, yeah, like I said, yeah, we're in Hillcrest or something. We still, we can see. Oh no, we can't see them. Oh, and it's kind of a pain we still feel.
Thanks for bringing up that 50th birthday party memory. That was a kicker.
Mr. Dan, what a guy.
Microphone.
He put a smile
Put
on
it
a
up
lot
to
of
you.
our faces. He gave us joy. You know, Dan somehow always seemed to be a calming voice. Through whatever situation and circumstance was happening, he found a way to make you feel okay. And, you know, it was his gift. I mean, the guy was a gift to all.